Happy first day of spring, everybody. It's Miss Jenichen here. I just love the first day of spring, and I'm so happy that here where I live, it is a sunny, beautiful day. It really, truly does feel like the first day of spring. You can smell the flowers, you can see them. The birds were chirping this morning, so I hope that you are having just a wonderful day as I am. For today, on this first day of spring, I decided to read one of my favorite books, Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. And this is a scholastic book. You can see sometimes books down here at the bottom have a publisher. So the title is Make Way for Ducklings. And I chose this book for this first day of spring because most of the time in spring, that's when we see a lot of baby animals being born. That's why during Easter time we see lots of chicks, we see lots of baby bunnies. And so in this case, we're going to be reading a story about some little ducklings. Can you tell by the picture what a duckling is? It's a baby duck. That's right. All right, here we go. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be no foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. So the mommy and daddy duck are called Mr. and Mrs. Mallard. And a mallard is a kind of duck. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. If anyone knows where Boston is, it's in a state called Massachusetts, and that's on the east coast of the United States, super far. But when they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard, so down they flapped. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water. So Mr. and Mrs. Mallard followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. Do you see the big bird that they're talking about? Right here, is that a real bird or is that a pretend bird? That's a pretend one, that's a swan. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes, no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But, whenever we see this, but, either a dash or a ... it usually means there's a catch. I wonder what it could be. "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard all of a sudden. "You'll get run over!" And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else." What scared them? A bike. So they flew over Beacon Hill and around the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in the Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. I wonder if they'll ever find a place for their babies. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks just like the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All of their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. Can you say molt? Molting is something that birds do, like it says. That sometimes they lose their feathers during a season when they're molting, and it's okay, but they just can't fly. But of course, they could swim. And one day they swam over to the park, and on the riverbank, there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that, the Mallards called on Michael every day. What does it sound like if a duck calls on a person? Do you think they say, "Hey, over here"? No, they probably go quack, 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 quack. I hope you're quacking like ducks with me right now. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs to make sure they were still all there. Wow. One day, the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack. Wow, all of the babies' names rhyme, don't they? Wow, Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. This is what it feels like when you have pride. When you're so proud of yourself. Have you ever felt so proud of yourself before? Mommy and Daddy Mallard were bursting with pride. It was great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll see you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. So off goes the daddy to see what he can find. And they're going to meet in that park that they saw first at the beginning of the story. Do you remember that? She taught them how to swim and dive. Oh, so cute. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. Wow, look at how good of a little line those ducklings can make. I know that the students in my class could probably get some help from these little ducklings. Look at how good they can walk in a line. I know that if we were in school together right now, I'd be reading this book and we would probably be walking down the hallway like little ducklings following me. So maybe you can close your eyes and imagine that we could be doing that right now instead of staying at home. So cute. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come on, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into the line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. When I say bank, I mean the bank of the river. So they were on one end of the river, and they went to the other bank of the river, the other area of the river. There they waded ashore and waddled along until they came to a highway. Uh-oh. Give me a thumbs up if you think there might be a problem here. Those little ducklings are sure good at walking in a line, but I see something that could potentially be a problem this way. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk, went the horns. Quack, went Mrs. Mallard, and she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. I'm sure the babies probably sound like this. Quack, 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 quack. They made such a noise that Michael, do you remember Michael, the character, the police officer? Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Tweet, it says. Quack, quack, honk, honk. Wow, do you see all those labels with the sound effects? Authors are really good at doing that. If you ever write a book, you could put labels like that too. Quack, quack, honk, tweet. Great detail, huh? He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. You know, if any of you walk to school, chances are there might be somebody called a crossing guard that helps you cross the street, and they go toot toot with their little whistles, and they might hold up a sign or hold their hand up, and they'll tell the people to cross the street. This character, Michael, the police officer, he's helping Mrs. Mallard and the 8 little ducklings cross the street, just like a crossing guard. Wow. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. It looks like he probably technically wasn't supposed to help ducklings cross the street, but he did it because he thought it was the right thing to do. Would you do that if you were a police officer? Or if you weren't a police officer? He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducklings walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of ducks? What?" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." Wow, Michael sure seems to care about those ducklings to make sure they get safe across. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned onto Charles Street with Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, all marching in line behind her. Are all 8 ducklings still there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. Look at the people in the window and over here are going, what? Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, isn't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud and tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. She is so proud of her babies, huh? You show me what you would look like when you're proud. I am so proud. It's like when I see my students walking in a line, listening to me and following directions, and I go, proud teacher, proud Miss Jenichen. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Can you see them? Wow, look at all those people who are stopping for just a couple of ducklings and a mama duck. Wow. Right on into the public garden. Wow, they made it. Yay! Inside the gate, they all turned around to say thank you to the policemen. The policemen smiled and waved goodbye. The policemen are saying bye-bye, and the duckies are going quack, 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 which probably means thank you in duck language. When they reached the pond and swam across to the island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. Do you see the daddy duck right there? The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they followed the swan boats and ate peanuts. And when night falls, they swim into their little island and go to sleep. The end. That was Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. It's a scholastic book, and it actually won the Caldecott Medal. Sometimes when we see books, they have a little medal on them. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a very happy spring.